Project management and controls are one of the most effective things you can do to ensure a successful digital transformation. What I want to talk about today are the 6 things that are critical to ensuring you have the right project governance and controls in place for your digital transformation. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients through their digital transformation journeys. And as I mentioned, project governance and controls are one of the biggest reasons for success, and they're also one of the biggest reasons for failure when you don't have those project governance and controls in place. Now, a lot of project managers think that if they just have a solid project plan and a solid resource plan and they keep an eye on tasks being completed on a timely basis, that's enough to keep the project on track. But there's a lot more to project governance and project controls than that. And what I want to do today are talk about the 6 things that are critical to ensure that you have the right project governance and controls in place for your transformation. Now, the first thing, and probably the most obvious thing that you need to have in place from a project governance perspective, is a very clear project plan. And not only do you need the project plan to be clear, but you need it to be realistic. So you need a realistic view of how much time, effort, resources, and budget the project is going to consume. And one thing you don't want to do in this case is to just take the proposed project plan that your software vendor or your system integrator provides to you, because there's 2 things that are wrong with those inputs. One reason is that those project plans are typically unrealistic to begin with. They have underestimated time and cost typically in those proposed project plans that they provide you during the sales cycle. And the second reason is because the project plans that are provided to you by software vendors and system integrators are typically not complete. They don't include everything that's required to make a project successful. So your project plan needs to do 2 things. It needs to take your system integrator or your software vendor's proposed project plan as an input, but you need to rationalize that plan, tailor it for your specific needs, and also add to that plan to create a more complete program management plan that includes all the other work streams outside the realm of what the system integrator does. Which brings me to the final point here, which is that you don't want to just assume that your system integrator's project plan is the project plan. There's inevitably going to be a lot of different activities that you're responsible for, that other third parties might be responsible for, and you want to make sure to have a complete plan that uses that SI or vendor plan as an input in one piece of it, but you need other pieces to complete the entire picture. And then finally, you want to make sure that your project plan is aligned with your overall strategy as an organization. So whatever direction you're going, whatever you're trying to accomplish as an organization, you need to make sure that you've translated those strategic goals and objectives into your project charter so that you have clear decision-making criteria and a clear vision for how this project is going to support the bigger picture strategy of your organization. So having that project charter, the project plan, the resource plan, the budget in a very realistic manner is one of the first keys to ensuring that you have the right project governance and controls in place. Now, the next component of an effective project governance structure is to make sure you're using the right methodologies and the right tool sets in deploying your transformation. Your software vendor will likely have some sort of technical software methodology for designing and building the software, but you also need to have methodologies that address things like change management and data migration, process improvement, things of that nature that are generally outside the realm or the scope of what the system integrators and the software vendors do well. So having that complete methodology that captures all of those different tools that are required to make the project successful is critical. The other thing you want to do is once you have these methodologies and tool sets that may have worked in past situations and past instances, you want to make sure that they're aligned with what you're trying to accomplish as an organization and that they're aligned with the culture of your organization. So for example, one common challenge we see in today's day and age are methodologies that are centered around agile development methodologies. And agile, for those that don't know, is a way to basically create little bite-sized chunks of an implementation and start deploying technology faster to the organization. And most software vendors are migrating toward an agile development approach, which is very hot right now in the software development space, but a lot of bigger organizations especially find that it's not suitable to use an agile development methodology when a more traditional waterfall methodology might work better. So that may or may not be relevant to your organization, but that's one example of how a canned methodology off the shelf may or may not fit your organization. And you want to make sure that you really rationalize and validate and tailor those methodologies and tool sets for your organization and what you're trying to accomplish. One of the most surprising things about transformations that catch a lot of project teams off guard is just the sheer number of decisions that need to be made operationally as it relates to the project plan, resources, that sort of thing. And oftentimes, executives will delegate those decisions to the project team and assume that they're just going to handle everything that needs to be handled in terms of decision making. But that's not necessarily the right answer. Executives ultimately, at times, will need to make decisions around what our operational model will look like, or how we're going to resource a project, or what sort of strategic decisions we need to make as an organization. And while the project team might be in a good position to make a recommendation or to suggest what might be the best fit for your organization, it's ultimately up to the executive team to ensure that they're at least blessing any sort of recommendations that are made. Or in some cases, if the project team can't arrive at any sort of consensus, it may be the executives that need to rock the decision off center to be able to get to that decision and get the alignment that's needed organizationally. One of the biggest mistakes that organizations make, and executive teams in particular make, is they push all the decision making to the project team and just force them to make decisions that they may not be in the best position to make. So for example, if you're implementing a solution that affects both sales and finance, for example, what's best for finance, or a decision that's best for finance, may not be the best decision for sales, and you find yourself at an impasse, or at the very least you find yourself caught up in a political indecision. So you want to make sure that your executives are prepared to make those sorts of decisions, and you want to make sure you've clearly defined what decisions get made by the project team versus what decisions get escalated to either the project sponsor or the executive team. So those are some things to think about as you think about decision making within your project governance structure. If there's one thing on our list here today that seems like it may have nothing to do with project governance, but really it does, that's going to be your business case. Oftentimes organizations think of a business case as something that's meant to rationalize a decision or to justify an investment in technology, which it certainly is. It can be used for that, and it oftentimes is. But what people don't understand, and one of the secrets and the secret values of business cases, is that they provide a very strong project governance framework. If you've done it right and you have a realistic business case that outlines your expected cost, and more importantly, your expected business benefits and your business value from the transformation, that's going to help you tremendously in the decision-making and the project governance process. And to give you an example, one common thing we see, probably the number one value of business case as a project governance tool, is that we often see organizations and project teams that are faced with requests to customize software. Someone somewhere in the organization wants to change the software to do something it wasn't built to do. Sometimes it's for a good reason. It's a strategic competitive advantage that they're trying to change. In other cases, it's a symptom of resistance to change. So instead of having qualitative anecdotal debates or philosophical debates about whether or not we should customize function A or B or C, we can actually point to the business case and look at what is the cost of customizing software in this example versus what is the business value we'll get out of it. If it helps us achieve meaningful material business value, then maybe it does make sense to invest in that sort of customization or whatever the decision might be. But if it doesn't, we can't quantify the business benefit, or there is no business value, but there's a relatively high cost to implement that change within the project, then the decision becomes pretty clear that that's a hard no. So the business case can be a very effective tool for project governance. If you don't already have one in place, as part of your decision-making process or your planning process, I highly encourage you to create a cost-benefit analysis, if anything, just to help you with the project governance process. Another activity that may not sound like a project governance activity, but really it is change management, organizational change management, to be clear. The reason for this is that organizational change puts a lot of pressure on project governance, and it can create a lot of challenges with the project overall. It can derail a project. If you don't have effective change management, that's when you get misalignment, that's when you get resistance to change, and no amount of perfection in project governance and execution is going to be able to overcome massive resistance to change. So having change management in place is almost a insurance policy or a way to hedge and mitigate some of those risks that can disrupt project governance and project execution. And to get a better idea of how organizational change management can help you in your project and your project governance, I've included our guide to effective organizational change management. I've included a link to that below. Be sure to download that. It has a ton of best practices and lessons and prescriptive best practices that you can use to ensure that you have effective change management baked into your overall project governance. Finally, and arguably most importantly, you want to make sure that your project governance includes a very solid risk management framework. We at Third Stage use a 13-point risk management and risk assessment framework that we use throughout the entire project for new projects, but also clients that hire us to come figure out what went wrong with a failed implementation. We also use that same framework to help in expert witness cases where attorneys hire us to come in and provide an independent expert opinion on why a project failed. So a framework like that, something that's technology agnostic, that's independent, it can be very powerful, and it's very important to anticipate and spot and detect risks before they become apparent. And that's part art and it's part science, but having the right framework and the right expertise and skill set supporting you in your transformation will ensure that you're able to mitigate those risks before they become unavoidable. And one other word of caution is you want to make sure that it's not your system integrator providing that quality assurance or the risk mitigation in your implementation. That would be much like someone grading their own homework and doing a self-assessment of how great they are. You need to know not just how great they are, you need to know where the risks are. So that risk mitigation framework should be independent of the system integrator, and it should be someone that has nothing to gain or lose by identifying the appropriate risks and the risk mitigation strategies. So these are just 6 of the most important project governance tool sets that can help make your transformation successful. But for more information and more best practices on how to effectively manage your project, whether it's a digital transformation, an ERP project, CRM, HCM, whatever it may be, I've included a link below to our 2021 Digital Transformation Report. That report contains a number of best practices and lessons learned from organizations throughout the world that have gone through transformations like yours. So I encourage you to download that white paper below. I hope you found this information useful and I hope you have a great day.